My name is Jameel. I work as the head of digital strategy at Havas People, and my role is to kind of understand what role technology will play in the digital landscape, in how we personalise, how we communicate, and essentially what that's going to lead to in the future. Now, the reason I mention the future is this is London, but quite obviously it's probably not the London which you guys will see when you step outside today. Now, in this London, we have a character, let's call her Astrid. Astrid will wake up, and as Matt has rightly said, she will walk by her desk. Her desk will know what information she needs to read that day. She'll walk to her coffee machine, which knows the temperature of her coffee. She'll walk to her medicine cabinet, which knows it's a Thursday, what vitamins does she need on a Thursday morning. She'll then go back to her desk, she'll log in, she'll read everything she needs to, friends will call, out she goes to brunch, and that's the early morning done. Now, you're probably thinking, so far so millennial, and yeah, it probably is. But then we need to bring that back in. She's going to come back in at the end of the evening. Her feedback is already there for her, ready for her. Her alarms are always set for the morning. And the whole idea of this is Astrid has not had to change anything of her workday. Everything has been personalised for her, ready for her to proceed as she would, however she chooses. So the reason that works is what we understand about personalisation. What do we mean it to be? Well, digitally, we think personalisation is the ability to deliver contextually relevant information, content, or an experience to a targeted individual at any point in time. What does that content need to be? Again, everyone before me has already said this. It needs to be emotional, it needs to be empathic, interactive, and relevant. More importantly, just as Ian had said, it needs to be non-intrusive. So despite the fact we know so much about you, how much is that bordering onto creepiness? What should we scare you away from the fact we know so much about you? And at the same time, it needs to be human. What does that humanity mean? Well, the human mind is actually very, very good at understanding when something isn't real. You go to watch a film, there's a lot of computer imagery in there, but you know this because A, you're in a theatre, and if you're not, you're pirating, that's very wrong. But the fact it's human, when we use a computer, how does that computer speak back to us? That language needs to be natural, and when it's not, that's when we turn off. So people who've said in the past that it's not going to happen to us, or not in our generation at least, well, again, as everyone has said, we recognise all these brands day to day, and we actually use them day to day. Google will personalise our searches based on what we've input in the past. Facebook will deliver content to us, whether that be images or video, based on what we search for, what we like, what we share, who we become friends with, where we tell it that we study. Amazon will recommend items each time we log in. Netflix will tell us what to watch based on our viewing habits. Fitbit understands what our health and well-being is like, and again recommends based suggestions. Nest is our general lifestyle, so what will my house be the perfect temperature when I walk in the evening after work? And again, there's a whole conversation to be had about the whole Internet of Things. But all of these are fantastic examples of what's happening with personalisation. Again, what Ian had mentioned is we are targeted with over 3,000 pieces of information per day. But all that is completely irrelevant if none of it means anything to us. And in fact, we're told 59% of people actually think that nothing is based on them. Therefore, there's no reason for them to have a conversation with a marketer, because in fact spent quite a lot of money and time building up what that strategy should be. But what happens when you do personalise? Well, we're told that up to 62% of shoppers are more happy to buy, and actually will buy more when they're met with a personalised retail experience. How does that become digitally? Well, 75% of people who use the likes of Amazon and Mr. Porter and Net-a-Porter, when they sign into an e-commerce website and the initiation is personalised for them, that engages them a lot more. How do we take that back into the real world? Well, 70% of shoppers say that they're more than happy to give their details over for the sake of a personalised benefit. So if you were to walk into a Tesco, give your club card details, which obviously has collected what you purchased, how you purchased in the past. You go in there, sign into their in-store Wi-Fi using your club card details. They can then suggest benefits back to you and vouchers for your shopping trip, which is all good, but that's not why I'm here. My conversation is about recruitment. Now, we look at the consumer market and the recruitment market as two very different things, and in terms of what the future of that holds, there's a very different attitude that we have. Everything that's come before, and with no disrespect to everybody else before me, That's been very transactional. So it's about how do we convince somebody to transact, to make a decision immediately. The way we look at personalization in recruitment is conversational instead, so it's now more embedded. It's about building relationships, because you're not investing time into an employer just for that one day, you're doing it for the next stage of your life. That starts with us, all the way from the candidate attraction. How do we attract the right people that we want working for us, all the way into making sure that the time that we have invested in them is staying with us. And that happens in delivering this content and this experience. Now, traditionally, what's happened is that employers have led this conversation. They find that they've got a vacancy in their organisation. So they advertise what their business needs are. They tell people that these are the skills that we look for. They say, well, you know, this is our culture, so if you have these, and this is what might entice you to work with us, and this is what our future is. So, you know, we're growing, we need you, you'll become a part of us. But again, that conversation is now changing. And especially with the Gen Y and Gen Z people, the candidates have now started to ask the same questions. So they're asking, what are your business needs? I bring my skills, but which of my skills are good for you and which of my skills can enhance your proposal? At the same time, do your culture and in fact do your values fit with who I am as a person? And what is my future within your organisation? So it's not about where you want to go, it's where are you taking me and what can I do to help that? So based on this attraction, I mean, Facebook is a fantastic idea of this, and the likes of what Google do with AdWords and AdSense at all times. It's programmatic buying. So it's very easy to look at these individuals and say, well, somebody's looking for a job as an account director in London. The next time they log on to Google, where your display ads are, could be several jobs for account directors. It could be for an account executive, it could be for an account manager, it could be jobs in London. It could be for an accountant as well, but that just means Google's not doing its job very well. We actually work with Emirates, and we we buy media and we place these for them. So based on what people's search habits are, we can then make sure that they're attracted to who they are, which is nothing new. Obviously, people have been doing it for a very long time. But how do we personalize that experience? And for here, we need to take a step back and not just consider the business. What we now need to do is what excites that person, what gives them character, what creates a profile for them. So say, for example, is it somebody who enjoys, well, in fact, I'll give you an idea of a hedge fund manager. There's a vacancy going. The pay is absolutely fantastic, as we probably all know from the papers. But the job is very high pressure. You're probably not going to make a lot of friends because everyone's fighting for the same rewards. So what do? Do you kind of advertise all these negative attitudes? Or do you look at what the job entails? So what about someone who enjoys extreme sports? They enjoy the adrenaline rush. They like the idea of success. Would that profile, who is completely unrelated to the job at hand, fit into the culture of what we try to live and what we want to breathe? That now becomes a lot more personal. How will that work in real time? Well, we have a sister agency in Amsterdam, Havas Boondoggle, and what they did was they had an internship program, and they had a month to fill their placement. So they took an advert out on Airbnb. Now, it wasn't a paid advert in the strictest sense. What they did was they just created a profile, and they said, well, we're looking for someone who's adventurous, someone who can think out of the box, someone who can relate to us in a much better way. We'll provide you with the apartment, you just bring you. And this is what they did. So it was something which completely ignored the job board altogether. Fantastic response, and they had their candidate within a week. So how does personalisation work with us at Havas People? Well, what we do is we look at human behaviour, and we need to understand how that keeps developing and changing as people's perceptions and people's attitudes to life change. And we need to look at that in terms of interaction, and my specific role is about digital interaction. So how do people communicate with devices? What are the devices that they use? Where do they expect them devices to be? So we need to preempt this and kind of engage with this well before the potential candidate has recognised the need that to happen. We use that to then create this conversation again. Now, as we know, the conversation needs to start from the employer, but it's just as important that the candidate has the conversation with the employer as well. So it's now two-way, and it has to be beneficial for both. But that conversation is pointless if there's absolutely no conversion at the end of this. The way we do it is we look at data quite deeply. So we look at data from the likes of social feeds, we look at Google Analytics, we look at data given to us through market research by our clients. We then report this and create a snapshot of what's happening at that point in time, which we can then use to predict. And in fact, what we use it to is action what will happen next. And this is where we start to use our understanding of technology. We then use that to create a much richer conversation with our clients, and so that they can continue these conversations with their potential candidates. They may send out an offer to a candidate, that candidate accepts, that creates a new data point for us, and again we can continue this loop, constantly advising, constantly making sure that the right changes are being made at the right point in time. Which is good from the employer's side, but how does it work from a candidate? If you're an active job seeker, well, from the candidate experience at the moment is very sporadic, so it's across different platforms. It goes into print media, into graduate fairs, online. Friends and family may know of a job opening for you and recommend that. How do we see the personalised route being? Well, if we focus on technology, that we can actually control and direct that a lot more. So we start from social feeds. Now, social feeds are very interesting because you're providing all the information for us to use, and as recruiters it's probably the best start point because it's the richest, and at the best of times it's the most truthful. So we use this, and another of our sister agencies called Havas Helia have developed a profile engine called Quicksilver. Now what Quicksilver does is amalgamates all this data from different segments, and it can create a much richer profile. We can then use that to make sure that the right person is seeing the right content at the right time. I've given the example of YouTube, but just in the media recently there was the example of Snapchat, who decided that they needed new developers. Where to look for the best developers? Well, look at all the brands that they compete against for developers. So the likes of Uber, the likes of Pinterest, the likes of Airbnb. Now, if you were a Snapchat user at any of these competing brands, you would see a very specific screen related to you. So if you walked into your Uber office as a developer, you open up the Snapchat app, it'd ask you, is this place driving you mad? If you activate it, it will then lead you to the job referral for Snapchat. Again, with Pinterest, are you feeling pinned down? Airbnb, are you not sleeping well? So everything is relevant, but it's being personalised for that specific segment based on what Snapchat have access to. There's often a call to action. I mean, with Snapchat, it was going to their applicant referral program. We could very easily say, well, we've developed an app and we'd like you to come in, input your details into the app. From there, we can ascertain who you are. We may decide we have a graduate fair going. And what we do is we send you an invitation, you'd come in, you'd use your mobile technology to actually sign in, and just that small transaction would give us everything we need to know about you. I'm sure there's people out here who use contactless payments, you've used your Oyster cards, they're all built on NFC technology. So what we do from that is, knowing who you are, we can provide an experience for you. So now whether that becomes location based, whether it's experiential, whether it's virtual reality, we can make sure that that experience is tailored for you. Say for example, there's a person who wishes to have a job in an airline, and at the same time she might have vertigo, which probably not the best career choice for her. But there's no reason why that airline cannot provide jobs at ground level, so whether it be at head office, whether it be as a traffic control or ground staff. So we see we've taken all these different elements, what we know about a certain person, to make sure that we're welcoming them in, we're understanding who they are and making sure that this message is for them. They've got the experience, but they've not bought into it. Well, what do we do? Well, there's no reason why we can't have a human at the end of that conversation. The likes of Google Hangout would make it very easy for us to have a two-way conversation with somebody. If there's a candidate who has a question that hasn't been answered, well, what better way than to ask somebody directly and have a completely personalised response? That person then leaves the graduate fair and he or she likes what they've experienced. They've decided they're quite embodied into the brand now and what we believe their future could be. So they will go back to the app and they'll go back to their social platforms and share this amongst their group of friends. So they're telling people, like, look, this is who I am, this is what excites me, someone's recognised that. At the same time, they're going back online and going back to the recruiter's website. All that information, all that data that we have is now personalised for that person's experience. And when we hit the applicant tracking system, everything is already defined for them. So that whole process, that whole journey is now much, much easier. At this point, they make their application. They they give an offer and they accept that offer. So what happens? Well, what we do is we onboard them, and we use that, again, very easily with a device most personal to them. We send out an app which has all our values, our handbook, all our rules, all our timings, our dress code, everything available for them immediately. Just a few examples of what we've done is we did a project for Specsavers where if you were an active job hunter, you would log on to the website, you'd put in the kind of job you're looking for, and it would use the GPS in your phone to actually tell you whether those jobs were available in your local area. Likewise with Tesco, which is a huge global brand, if you visited from England, or in fact the UK, all the information would be given to you in English. But if you were to visit from Thailand, everything would then be translated based on your location direct to who you were. With regards to the onboarding app, it was Rachel who mentioned that 50% of new starters leave within the first 18 months. Well, this is where we found the best way to attract those candidates. Make sure that before they started, they knew what the culture of the brand was, of the employer was. They knew exactly what they were in for, our values, and they could actually meet people and members of their team well before their actual first day of started. So nobody walked in feeling alienated. So how do we action that personalisation? Well, we look at it as recognising the person, and what that means is who is that person at an individual level. So is it a new graduate who's just looking for their first job, they're very excited, almost like a little puppy running around looking for, right, what's out there for me? Or is it the CEO of a financial firm? The route of attraction is actually very different, and this is where we talk about target and hyper-targeting. For the new graduate, it could be very easy for us to use social media to make sure that they're seeing the content at the right time. For the CEO, does it mean that we take out an advert in the Financial Times instead? Something which they're more likely to read, something which kind of resonates much better with them. Once we do this, we need to move from a push to a pull system of marketing. So the traditional push method was to recognise there's a vacancy, place it in a jobs board, and hope people will apply. What pull does instead is recognise the characteristics of the role, identify those people very intimately, and make sure that the right people are seeing the right content. These people, when they see that, are now more emotionally embodied within what that role could be. They're now the people who are more willing to apply, and as a result we have a much more higher quality talent pool. So that's all well and good for candidate attraction. What happens in the long term? Well, again, we can personalise what that means to our future employees, and again, this is a culture issue which we have with employers. What we need to do is consider the individual. That means looking at what that person is doing at that point in time, at any given time. So is somebody overcome by a huge workload, or is it a work-life balance that they're not achieving? What we need to do with that is measure real-time responses. Now, it sounds big, but it's actually happening every single day in a lot of different industries at the same time. So instead of an annual survey, why don't you let an employee choose when they want to speak to their employer? Tell them exactly what's happening in their life at that point in time. And as a result, let the employer recognise this and reward them for that reason. An example could be someone who's been working on a pitch for 2 weeks straight. They've not had a chance with their families. So what does the employer do? Well, it says, well, we know you do this. Why don't you take a day off next week? Hypothetical thinking, but again, like I say, it happens a lot of the time. So talking about the future of personalisation, what is it? Well, it's an investment from both the employer and the employee. For the employer, it's about finding a candidate who's looking for a career and not just a job. And this is why we find the idea of conversations being so embedded and talking about the long term. But there's actually a further step beyond this, and it's the opportunity of personalisation. And we believe that with correct personalisation, the opportunity is to have a perfectly aligned workforce where everyone's cultures, everyone's skills, everyone's business needs all align, and you have the best performance in there. What's been said before is personalised will become second nature, and in fact what will start to happen is when something isn't personalised, that's when we'll start to worry. Users will expect a single touch point, so at the moment that becomes on 3 mobile devices, maybe in the future that becomes a single device, and that device, will there be an experience attached to that? The candidate journey will change, so at the moment the employees choose the time of an interview and what they need to ask you, but instead we feel that that candidate will control the journey, so they will choose when that interview is, on their choice of platform, in their choice of language, on their time. Now, what excites us is understanding what all this is and what it means for the future. But essentially what we want to do is start being pushed by clients to make these new discoveries and essentially to find out what conversations are out there to happen. Thank you.